Welcome to another episode of Muscles and Magic the Gathering. Now, I'm Bobby Maximus. I am the Muscles, and these cards, these are one of my greatest lifelong passions, Magic the Gathering. Today, we're going to go over one of my favorite Kinfolk type decks. We're going to go over a human deck headed by none other than Rick, Steadfast Leader. I think he is the best leader, the best commander for a human Kinfolk deck. And we're going to get into why and how I built my deck. Whether you're a beginner or whether you're a pro player, this series is for you. You'll learn synergies, strategies, and honestly, it's a great way for me to showcase my cards. Like, if I'm really honest with you, I'm not the greatest commander player on the planet. I'm not Brian Kibler. I'm not on the pro tour. But I've been collecting for 30 plus years now. And a couple of years ago, a couple of really good friends of mine convinced me to start playing Commander. Before that, I only played 60 card decks and I collected. I had over 40 complete sets. Once I sunk my teeth into Commander, I was absolutely hooked. And it became the premier way for me to display my Magic the Gathering collection. So the cards you see in this deck, this isn't your normal standard deck tech type video. These are all cards that I own. If you want to see a complete list of my decks, you can check it out in the show notes. But all of these decks exist in real time. The cards that are in the decks, I actually own them. There's no proxies, and I'm not shuffling cards between decks. So if there's a Mana Crypt in this deck, there's an Anointed Procession in this deck. If there's a Sarah's Sanctum in this deck, they live and breathe in this deck. Anyway, enough about that. It's time to get down to the reason we're here. A little deck tech, a little commander for dummies for humans. So first of all, let's talk about why I chose Rick, Steadfast Leader, as a commander. Now, first of all, it's not a unique card. It's a reprint, a reskin, if you will, from another card, Greymond Avacyn Stalwart. But this was from The Walking Dead Secret Lair. And I got to add something in. I absolutely love the Universes Beyond. I know some people don't like them, but they are my thing, and I love Secret Lair. So Wizards, keep them coming. Anyway, Rick, Steadfast Leader. He's a human soldier, and as Rick enters the battlefield, you choose two abilities. You can choose from First Strike, Vigilance, and Lifelink. Humans you control have each of the chosen abilities. So if you've got a human Kinfolk type deck, it makes all your humans really strong. So obviously the creatures in this deck, there's going to be a lot of humans. And as long as you control 4 or more humans, humans you control get +2/+2. So this acts as a human anthem. Now, when I build these Kinfolk type decks, I try to keep them true to form. I try to keep them pure from a collection standpoint. So elves, I try to keep them all elves. Goblins, I try to keep them all goblins. That said, there are exceptions. In my elf deck, the Woodland Realm is what the deck is called, and it's headed by Lathril, Blade of the Elves. I've got a Craterhoof Behemoth. Why? Because it's a massive win condition. In the Goblin deck, I've got a Perforus. The Goblin deck is called Jareth's Army, but Perforus is one of the main win conditions. In this deck, you'll see a couple of things that aren't human, and that's okay. I'm trying to balance between collecting and making these things competitive. So that is our commander, all right? We'll cover off Planeswalkers next. I've got 3 Planeswalkers in this deck. The first is Elspeth Sun's Champion. And I want this deck to make tokens, right? The win conditions on this deck, I want to make a bunch of humans. I want to make a bunch of other tokens. I don't want to overwhelm the other players on the board. So Elspeth Sun's Champion, its casting cost is 6, a fairly high casting cost, but I'm okay with it. And I say fairly high casting cost because in general, one thing I really pay attention to is the total mana value of my deck. Not a lot of people talk about this, but I'm looking it up on my Mox field now. The total mana value of this deck is 173. That means it's going to move really fast, and I'm going to get my cards on the battlefield really fast. 200 for me is like the magic number. I want my decks to be under 200 when it comes to total mana value. If you're watching this, you don't know what total mana value is, and honestly, that's something I had to look up. It's all of these symbols on the card added together for your deck. So a lot of my decks, I try to keep it low. One of the ways I do that is by using cards with low casting costs. Another way is that all my decks have a minimum of 35 lands, right? And lands don't count towards your mana value. And so it can keep that cost low, if you will. At any rate, Elspeth Sun's Champion comes out with 4 loyalty counters. The +1 is put 3 1/1 white soldier creatures onto the battlefield. The -3 is destroy all creatures with power 4 or greater. And then -7 is you get an emblem with creatures you control have +2/+2 and flying. Really important to be able to build some flyers in this deck. Archangel Elspeth, the +1 ability. First, it comes out with 4 loyalty counters. The +1 ability, you create a 1/1 white soldier creature token with lifelink. Lifelink's important. I want to gain a lot of life. The -2 on it is put 2 1/1 counters on target creature, and it becomes an angel in addition to its other types and gains flying. And then the -6 is return all non-land permanent cards with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. I got a lot of humans in here, and there's a lot of cards with mana value 3 or less. There's kind of like a sub-angel theme in this deck. The deck is actually called As Above, So Below. It comes from a guy in the 16th century, an Elizabethan named John Dee, who's an alchemist. Anyway, the deck is called As Above, So Below. So there's a lot of effects that turn my creatures or my tokens into angels in this deck, kind of like a hidden sub-theme. Third Planeswalker. This is Miku Divine Diva. Now, this is one of those reskins from Secret Lair. Again, I love these Secret Lair cards, the Japanese version. It comes out with 4 loyalty counters. It's actually Elspeth Tyrell is the card. The +2 ability is you gain 1 life for each creature you control. The -2 is you create 3 1/1 soldiers. The -5 is you destroy all other permanents except for lands and tokens. And because this deck is going to create a lot of tokens, that's really, really powerful. So those are my Planeswalkers. Now for creatures. All right. And the creatures, the humans are the star of the show. Recruiter of the Guard from Modern Horizons 3. I think it's an incredible card. When Recruiter of the Guard enters the battlefield, you can search your library for a creature card with toughness 2 or less, reveal it, put it in your hand and shuffle. It acts as a tutor. Not a lot of tutors in white, so this is really, really important. We have one of those non-humans, right? Odratak, Deepest Foundation. It's got Vigilance. If 1 or more creature tokens would be created under your control, 3 times that many tokens are created instead. When it dies, you transform it, and it turns into a land, all right? You can add 1 mana, 1 white mana, or you can transform it back and activate only if you attacked with 3 or more creatures this turn, and only as a sorcery, so you can turn it back. Here is the deal with this card, right? I can make a lot of tokens. So now can you imagine how this pairs with this? If I make 3 tokens, I actually make 9. So super powerful card, all right? And you can transform it both ways. Next, Sarah Ascendant. Lifelink, and as long as you have 30 or more life, Sarah Ascendant gets +5/+5 and has flying. Super value for a 1-drop. There's a lot of 1 and 2-drop cards in this deck. Drenith Magistrate. It's on the Game Changers list. Super powerful card. Your opponents can't cast spells from anywhere other than their hands. People play with graveyards. Shut that right down. Hanwar Militia Captain. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 4 or more humans, transform Hanwar Militia Captain. Transform it. It becomes the Westvale Cult Leader. And at the beginning of your end step, put a 1/1 white and black human cleric creature token onto the battlefield. I actually love these 2-sided cards, and I want to take another look here at, pardon me while I shuffle through these cards, at this, because I think these cards are super useful with the dual abilities. I think they're absolutely great, these transforming cards, and a lot of them have superpowers on both sides, all right? So I love these double-sided cards. You see a lot of these double-sided cards in my decks. Champion of the Parish. Whenever another human enters the battlefield under your control, put a 1/1 counter on Champion of the Parish. Monastery Mentor. It's got prowess. That means whenever you cast a non-creature spell, this creature gets +1/+1 until the end of turn. And whenever you cast a non-creature spell, create a 1/1 white monk creature token with prowess. Again, we're creating all kinds of tokens. And back to that card, the non-human. This is why I put it in as a non-human. I tell you guys all the time, I try to keep my kinfolk pure, but If I can triple my tokens, this card is super important. We're going to come back to that again and again and again. Academy Rector, an old school card from my collection. When Academy Rector is put into the graveyard from play, you can remove it from the game. If you do, search your library for an enchantment card and put it into play. Shuffle your library. Another tutor. Tutors in white are hard to come by. This is actually a really rare card. You don't see a lot of people with these, but really good for a tutor. Guide of Souls. Whenever another creature enters, you get an energy and 1 life. Whenever you attack, you can pay 3 energy. And when you do, put 2 1/1 counters and a flying counter on target attacking creature. It becomes an angel in addition to its other type. So a way to turn my creatures into angels. Remember that sub-theme. Talia's Lieutenant. When it enters the battlefield, put a 1/1 counter on each other human you control. Whenever another human enters the battlefield under your control, put a 1/1 on Talia. So a bunch of human anthem type of effects. Remember that as above, so below, John D. Angel theme, right? Human Cleric, the Bishop of Wings. Whenever an angel enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 4 life. And whenever an angel you control dies, create a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. Great way to create tokens. Now, Myril, Shield of Argive, or Myril, Shield of Argive. I actually don't know how to pronounce her name. But during your turn, your opponents can't cast spells or activate abilities of artifacts, creatures, or enchantments. A great shutdown card. And whenever she attacks, create X 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature tokens, where X is the number of soldiers you control. Again, pair that with that Ogre attack, and you were just making all the tokens. Loyal Retainers. I actually love the printing of this card. Sacrifice Loyal Retainers, return target legendary creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Activate this ability only during your turn before attackers are declared. Love this card to get stuff from my graveyard. Esper Sentinel, maybe the greatest 1-drop of all time. I mean, it's one of them. Whenever an opponent casts their first non-creature spell each turn, draw a card unless that player pays X, where X is Esper Sentinel's power. They're not going to be able to pay because he's going to be bumped up with all these anthems. Talia, Guardian of Thraben. A card people hate. Non-creature spells cost 1 more to cast. This is creature heavy, this deck, so I don't worry about that. It just punishes my opponents. Mother of Runes, another great 1-drop. There are a lot of great 1-drops in this deck. That's how I'm keeping that mana value so low. Target creature you control gains protection from the color of your choice until the end of turn. Great ability. Delney, Streetwise Lookout. Murders at Carla Manor actually was one of my favorite sets. It had some incredible cards of surveil lands, and this, the Vein Ripper, was a great vampire as well. But creatures you control with power 2 or less can't be blocked by creatures with power 3 or greater. If an ability of a creature you control with power 2 or less triggers, that ability triggers an additional time. Fantastic card. Witch Enchanter. These were some of the best parts of Modern Horizons 3, these dual-sided cards. And again, I told you before, I love the dual-sided cards. If you need a land, it can act like a land. If not, it can destroy artifacts or enchantments, which is more rare in Commander. Creature removal is easy. These are more rare, so I love them. Mikaeus the Lunarch. I honestly put this in because I love the printing of this card. It's one of those etched kind of foils from Double Masters, and it's human, so it fits. But I really, really just like the card. And sometimes I'll do that. If I really like the artwork, if I really like a printing, if I really like the theme, I'll throw it in a deck, right? Even if it's not the best card for the deck. But this one actually works here. Mikaeus the Lunarch enters the battlefield with X 1/1 counters on it. Put a 1/1 counter on Mikaeus. You can remove a 1/1 counter from Mikaeus and put a 1/1 counter on each other creature you can control. This can be a massive human anthem. Lauren of the Third Path. When Lauren of the Third Path enters the battlefield, destroy an artifact or enchantment. Again, a way to get rid of other people's stuff. I can also draw cards in a group hug type effect. Adeline, Resplendent Cather. So the power is equal to the number of creatures you control. I control a bunch of creatures. This can be a game ender. And whenever I attack for each opponent, create a 1/1 white human creature token that's tapped and attacking that player or planeswalker they control. So again, a way to make tokens. And with that Ogre Taj, I can create a bunch of tokens. The Grand Abolisher, massive card for a 2-drop. During your turn, your opponents can't cast spells or activate abilities of artifacts, creatures, or enchantments, so it shuts people down. And this deck is great. I've played with this a couple of times. It really does the job shutting people down. Talia Hereta Cather. First strike, creatures and non-basic lands your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. Great control card. Oh, big card right here, the Ranger Captain of Eos. When Ranger Captain of Eos enters the battlefield, you search your library for a creature card with mana value 1 or less, reveal it, put it into your hand, and shuffle. All right, if you sacrifice it, your opponents can't cast non-creature spells this turn. So I can go look for my Mother of Runes. I can go look for my Esper Sentinel. I've got a bunch of 1-drops in here that we can go look for. We can get Mikaeus. We can get the Mother of Runes. We can get the Esper Sentinel. So it is a great, we can get the Guide of Souls. It is a great, the Champion of the Parish. Like, it is a great little tutor card. And then finally, Metallic Mimic. I like the Metallic Mimic in a lot of Kinfolk type decks. It's a shapeshifter. You name a creature type. We're going to name humans, obviously, and it acts as a human anthem. They all get +1/+1. I think I talked about Recruiter of the Guard already. I put it over there. So those are my creatures, and it is a great stack of humans. Now, one thing to mention when you're building a Kinfolk type deck, it's actually the easiest and I think the cheapest type of deck to build. All you got to do is stick a bunch of humans in. And if you stick a bunch of humans in that play off each other, it's going to be good. You stick a bunch of goblins in a goblin deck, it's going to be good. Now, there are ways to fine tune this, but you really can't go wrong with the humans you want to put in a Kinfolk deck. Now that we're done those, let's go over artifacts. The Horn of Gondor, huge for creating these human soldier creature tokens. When the Horn of Gondor enters, create a 1/1 token, obviously a human soldier creature token. And then if you tap 3, we're not going to have a problem getting mana in this deck. I'll show you a couple of ways we're going to do that later. But create X 1/1 white human soldier creature tokens where X is the number of humans you control. I got a bunch of humans I control. I can create a bunch more. And then with that token generator, right? Not the token generator, the token tripler. Then I can make a ton of them. The Door of Destinies, human anthem type stuff. Only for a casting cost of 4. I think this is my second favorite. The Vanquisher's Banner is my favorite. This would be number 2. Number 3 would probably be Coat of Arms, but I really like this card. Soul Ring, mana ramp. Urza's Incubator, make my humans cheaper. You're building a Kinfolk deck. This is a must. I would actually put this in every Kinfolk deck, but this is something I talk about. I don't own enough cards. Like, I have a massive collection, but you can imagine with 50 plus commander decks, I can't put this in every single one. Like, so I got to pick and choose my spots, but this went in this deck to make my humans even cheaper. Skull Clamp, with all those 1/1 tokens, it's going to be a card draw engine, and I love this card, the Secret Lair version. There we go, Vanquisher's Banner. I told you I love this card. It is in here. Pro Medallion, because it's a white mono deck, let's make everything white cheaper. The One Ring, you know what this does. Game changer, great for card draw. And I'm not worried about the life I'm losing because you've seen there's a lot of effects in this deck to get life. Mana Crypt, banned right now, but I have a feeling by the time you watch this video, it's going to be unbanned. At least I'm hoping that it is. And here's the deal. I play with banned cards. A lot of my friends play with banned cards, and we're fine with it. As long as everyone's playing by the same rules, it's a fun game. I can always take it out if I need to, if someone doesn't want to play with banned cards. So I could replace it, right? But I like the card. And the other thing is with my decks is they're not just meant to be played with. Like, a lot of times they sit in my boxes. I look at them. I tinker them. It's how I spend my most private moments. And it's part of my collection. So you're damn right. I'm going to put a Mana Crypt in. Extraplanar Lens, great for a monocolored deck. When it enters the battlefield, you exile a target land. So obviously it's monocolored. I would exile a plains. And then whenever a land with the same name as the exiled card is tapped for mana, its controller adds 1 mana of any type that land produced, so a way to boost up that mana. Oketra's Monument. White creatures are cheaper by 1. And whenever I cast a creature spell, I create a 1/1 white warrior creature token with vigilance. Again, tokens. Look at that Jeweled Lotus. Beautiful. And again, 100% I am putting this in a deck, and I do believe it's going to be unbanned. You heard it here first. Commander's Plate, perfect for a monocolored deck. Protection for my commander, for Rick. Herald's Horn, another creature anthem type deck. It's actually not really even a creature anthem because it doesn't give them a bump, but it does make them cheaper. So that goes in the anthem in my books. The Throne of Eldraine, incredible card for a monocolored deck. As Throne of Eldraine enters the battlefield, you're going to choose a color. We're obviously going to choose plains. You add 4 mana of the chosen color when it's tapped. So obviously this is great in a mono-colored deck, and it acts as card draw as well. Now we're going to go on to instants. Actually, what do you want to do? You want to do instants or enchantments? Switch it up. Let's do enchantments. We have Anointed Procession. If an effect would create 1 or more tokens under your control, it creates twice that many tokens. So again, a token multiplier. Smothering Tithe, one of my favorite cards of all time. No explanation necessary. Renewed, by the way, this has to be in every white deck ever. Renewed Solidarity. As this enchantment enters, choose a creature type. We're choosing humans. It acts as a human anthem. And then at the beginning of your end step, for each token you control the chosen type that entered this turn, create a token that's a copy of it. Token generator. Divine Visitation. As above, so below. If 1 or more creature tokens would be created under your control, that many 4/4 white angel creature tokens with flying and vigilance are created instead. Great card. All those tokens, they're going to be angels. Cathar's Crusade. Bit of an anthem again. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield, put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control. This card is just nasty. It's not expensive. It's not high priced, but this does some real work in Commander. Someone brings their commander out. Instead of trying to get rid of it and send it back to the command zone where someone can recast it, stick this on it. Not a lot of people play enchantment removal. Enchanted creature is an insect artifact creature with base power and toughness 0/1. It has indestructible and loses all other abilities, card types, and creature types. This is so mean to stick on somebody's commander, but it had to go in this deck. Resourceful Defense. Remember all those counters I'm making? I can move any number of counters from target permanent to another target permanent. Valkyrie's Call. Whenever a non-token, non-angel creature dies, you return it to the battlefield with a 1/1 counter on it, and it's an angel, as above, so below. The Folk Hero. It's a legendary enchantment in the background, and this came from that Baldur's Gate set. Commander creatures you own have, whenever you cast a spell that shares a creature type with this creature, draw a card. Card draw engine, Luminarch Ascension. The beginning of each opponent's end step, if you didn't lose life, put a quest counter on Luminarch Ascension. And then you can tap some mana to put a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying onto the battlefield. And then we have another anthem, Flowering of the White Tree. I think this is underrated, one of the better cards to come from Lord of the Rings. But I love this in white decks. Legendary creatures I control get +2 and +1 and have ward. And then non-legendary creatures get +1/+1. Time for those instants. Chroma's Will. Great card in Commander. This is another one of those white cards that needs to be in every white deck. Enlightened Tutor, and this card, someone did an alter on it and signed it for me. The artist signed it, but I get to search my library for an artifact or enchantment. Swords to Plowshares, great removal card. I think this is actually the best removal card in the game because you can remove a target creature from the game. So this will allow you to handle those pesky creatures with Indestructible. Path to Exile. You can exile a target creature. Finale of Glory. Look at this. Create X 2/2 white soldier creature tokens with vigilance. If X is 10 or more, also create X 4/4 white angel creatures. Again, I'm going to be creating a lot of mana with this deck. I've got those token multipliers. This is a huge card in this deck. Came from War of the Spark. Replenish, another old school card. I got a lot of enchantments in this deck, so this allows me to get them from my graveyard and put them into play. Teferi's Protection. You need this in any white deck. Final Showdown from Outlaws of Thunder Junction. I really like this card. You pay 1, and then it's got a spree. So you can pay more for these effects, right? All creatures lose all abilities. Choose a creature you control. It gains Indestructible. You can destroy all creatures. And then we have the best board wipe. I mean, might be Damnation, but this is pretty damn good because they can't be regenerated. The Wrath of God. And that's the main portion of my deck. Now let's talk about lands. I got a bunch of just, basic lands in here. There's a 30th edition. I love that 30th edition set. I wish I was able to get more of them. Some planes that I like, some from Kamigawa. Ooh, these oil slicks. I love those. And now for the special lands, and I got a treat for you in here. The Rogue's Passage. Add 1 to my mana pool, or a target creature I have is unblockable. That's actually won me a lot of games. I think this is a completely underrated land. Maze of Ith, a way to deal with someone's attacking creatures. I include that in a lot of decks as well, especially monocolored decks where I don't need the mana. Amaria the Sky Ruin. As it enters the battlefield tapped at the beginning of your upkeep, if it controls 7 or more planes, I can return a target creature card from the graveyard to my battlefield. Super useful for graveyard retrieval. Metacelled Golden Hall of Edoras, Castle Ardenvale. It's from the Lord of the Rings set. It enters the battlefield tapped. Unless I control planes, I'm probably going to control planes. And then I can create one of those white human creature tokens. Cavern of Souls. Make my creatures so they can't be countered. Monumental Henge. What this really allows me to do, I want to focus on the last ability, to look at the top 5 cards in my library, and I can reveal a historic card from among them and put it in my hand. So it allows me to fish through my deck. Command Beacon. Avoid that pesky commander tax. Kiljoran Outpost, an old school card, allows me to make some soldier tokens. Nykthos, Shrine to Nyx, necessary in one of these types of decks. The big ability here, choose a color, add to your mana pool an amount of mana of that color equal to your devotion to that color. So this is one of those massive mana generators. Dust Bowl, not as good as a Wasteland, but useful. And I was going to say I don't have a Wasteland in every deck, but I have one here. So the Wasteland, we'll skip over Dust Bowl for a minute. This is going to allow me to just destroy a non-basic land, all right, without paying a mana. This one, I got to pay 3 mana, and I can destroy a target non-basic land. All right. 3-Tree City, useful in a creature type deck and in a monocolor deck. Choose a color, add an amount of mana of that color equal to the number of creatures you control the chosen type with all those tokens. This is going to be huge. Ancient Tomb, way to ramp up my mana. Minas Tirith enters battlefield tapped, but it allows me to do some card draw. War Room. In a monocolored deck, this is great because then I'm only paying 1 life and it allows me to draw a card. Flagstones of Tracair. When the Flagstones of Tracair is put in a graveyard from the battlefield, I can search my library for a plains card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. I thought it worked better than a basic land, so I included it. And it doesn't come in tapped, so it's a freebie. And then the big one. You don't see many of these, but Sarah's Sanctum. I add 1 white mana to my mana pool for each enchantment I control. So again, a ton of mana generation in this deck. With the mana generation in this deck, with the tokens that you're going to be creating, and the fact, what did I say that mana value was? I think I said it was 173. This deck moves fast and furious, and it's got all those human anthems, and with Rick and the abilities that they're going to get, this deck is going to be hard to deal with. The only question you have to decide is, out of these 2 abilities, you want First Strike, you want Vigilance, or Lifelink? I mean, all really, really work well. I would probably take Vigilance and Lifelink more often than not, but hey, whatever you got to do. So that is my As Above, So Below deck. Thank you for spending some time with me. You know, this series, I want to show off my collection. I absolutely love my collection. I'm always working on these decks. Like I said, in the show notes, I've got a link to this deck and my Mox field, but I'm always working on these things and I'm looking for suggestions. So if you've got some suggestions, like I said, I'm not a pro player, please get them in the comments. I may take you up on it and shout you out in one of these episodes. So thank you for spending time with me in doing something that's honestly, like I said, my greatest passion. A lot of people know me from the UFC world. They know me from the men's health world. They know me from fitness and stuff like this. But when I'm not working out, doing jiu-jitsu, things like that, this is where you can find me doing my Magic the Gathering. So thank you for stopping by.